Imagine two women diagnosed with the same type of breast cancer. One woman lives in an affluent neighborhood, while the other lives in a disadvantaged one. They have the same stage of breast cancer, but their chances of survival are not the same. The woman that lives in a disadvantaged neighborhood is far less likely to survive her breast cancer in comparison to her affluent counterpart, and this is even if they receive the exact same type of treatment. So why is this happening? We know that chronic stress is generally not good for us, but what we don't understand is how the chronic stress brought on from living in a disadvantaged neighborhood may impact cancer aggressiveness. I am researching how elevation of the chronic stress hormone known as cortisol may increase inflammation and cancer aggressiveness among breast cancer patients living in disadvantaged areas. To do this, our lab obtained 244 pretreatment blood samples from women living in Chicago. Some had breast cancer and some didn't. Some lived in affluent and others lived in disadvantaged neighborhoods. From a subset of our breast cancer patients, we were able to obtain 77 tumor samples. I used advanced techniques to measure and analyze the inflammatory proteins and stress hormones within their blood samples, as well as the genes within their tumor samples. And here's what I found. The breast cancer patients from disadvantaged neighborhoods had far higher cortisol levels compared to their cancer-free controls. And this was not true for the women from affluent neighborhoods. Their cortisol levels were not significantly higher than their cancer-free controls. This would suggest that the breast cancer patients from disadvantaged neighborhoods were experiencing disproportionately high levels of chronic stress. I next looked at how this was impacting their inflammation and found that the women from disadvantaged neighborhoods had an elevation of 62 different inflammatory proteins, and many of these proteins were directly associated with their elevated cortisol levels. This makes sense because past research has shown that chronic stress is associated with an increase in inflammation. And this is a problem because elevated inflammation is known to result in more aggressive breast cancer for these women. I next looked at their tumor samples and found that for the women from these disadvantaged neighborhoods, their genes were switched on in a way that promotes cancer aggressiveness. And again, many of these genes were directly associated with their elevated cortisol levels. So what this means is that chronic stress is resulting in an increase in inflammation and cancer aggressiveness among those residing in disadvantaged neighborhoods. So chronic stress isn't just something we feel, it's a biological force that can worsen patient outcomes. And this is important to understand because once we know how chronic stress is impacting breast cancer aggressiveness, this can lead to the development of novel therapeutics that can result in increased survival among those living in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Because where a person lives should not determine whether they survive breast cancer.